Hi guys, today I'll be talking about 5 simple chords to use in place of the G major chord to make your playing sound more jazzy and more like a pro instantly, even if you have no idea how jazz works. Note that the chords here are in the context of C major, so you might need to transpose the given chords if you're playing in another key. The first chord I'll be talking about is a G augmented chord. To get a G augmented chord, you need to start with the G major chord here, consisting of the first note G, the third note B, and the fifth note D. You then take the fifth note D and replace it with the sharp of the fifth note D sharp. And there you will now have a G augmented chord. Now let's take a look at how the G augmented chord sounds in practice. An extension of the G augmented chord will be the G augmented over G7 chord. This just means you need to play the G augmented chord together with a G7 chord, the G7 chord being the bass. As you can see here, the chord is divided into two chords, the G7 chord on the left and the G augmented chord on the right. For those of you who are not familiar with the G7 chord, it is just a G major chord with an additional F. Over here, you play the G7 chord in the bass with your left hand and the G augmented chord in your right hand. In this example, the G augmented chord is in its first inversion, but you can use whichever inversion you want and you'll still be likely to work. In addition, I personally prefer to not play the B in the G7 chord in order to not make it sound so heavy, but this is entirely optional and up to your personal preference. Here's an example of how the G augmented over G7 chord sounds in practice. The second chord I'll be talking about will be the G suspended fourth chord over here, also known as the G sus4 chord. The G sus4 chord is normally used at the end of a phrase before being resolved with a normal G major chord. To get a G sus4 chord, we start with a G major chord. We then take the fourth note of G major, which is C, and replace the third note B. As such, instead of playing G, B, and D, we play G, C, and D instead. And here we have the G suspended fourth chord. Here's an example of how it sounds in practice. Notice the feel that the G sus4 chord adds to my playing, and that after I play the G sus4 chord, I add a normal G major chord to resolve it. The third chord I'll be talking about is the F minor over G chord, which is commonly used to replace the G major chord. Essentially, F minor over G just refers to playing the F minor chord on top of a G bass note. You play an F minor chord consisting of F, A flat, and C in your right hand, and a G bass note in your left hand. Here's an example of how it sounds in practice. The fourth chord I'll be talking about is the F over G chord. Similarly, F over G just refers to playing the F major chord over a G bass note. Here you play the F major chord consisting of F, A, and C with your right hand together with a G bass note with your left hand. Here's how the F over G chord sounds in practice. The last chord I'll be talking about today will be the D flat minor 7 over G chord right here. This chord might sound more intimidating than the rest, but don't worry, as the way to play this chord is pretty similar to the previous chords. Like the previous chords, D flat minor 7 over G just refers to playing the D flat minor 7 chord in your right hand together with a G bass note with your left hand. Here's how the D flat minor 7 over G chord sounds in practice. Notice the nice jazzy feel that the D flat minor 7 over G chord adds to your playing. In addition, I like to use a C major chord right after the D flat minor 7 over G chord to end the phrase in a jazzy way too. That being said, you can also combine some of these 5 chords and play them one after another to make some interesting sounds. Here are some examples of how you can combine these chords. With that, thanks for watching and I hope you have learned something new today. Do leave a like and subscribe if you found this video helpful. Also, if you haven't already, check out Pitchgarden.com, a platform built to accelerate your journey to playing by ear. With multiple ear training exercises that enable you to practice identifying notes, sequences of notes, chords, and so on, each customizable to your preferred difficulty level. I've put a link in the description down below and hope to see you there.